Hi, my name is John Campbell, and I'm a candidate for the 53rd Congressional District of California. And today I want to talk to you about a word that is often polarizing, but I feel that it's very important, and I want to add a little bit more breadth of a perspective to it. The word is sustainability. So oftentimes there are some significant reactions to this word. I encourage you to watch the entire video and not jump to conclusions. And let me explain a few different viewpoints, and hopefully you'll understand that there's a lot of consistency in what I'm saying. So a little of my background is in operations. Actually, a significant amount is in operations. And a lot of what I look at from an operations standpoint is whether or not something is sustainable, whether it's an operation or a department or a policy. That's something that's very key and something I prioritize. Um, there's different scales of sustainability, everywhere from unsustainable all the way to sustainable in perpetuity. The latter being a good goal in some cases. So the first thing that pops into my mind from an operations standpoint on sustainability is budgets, and that's not exactly the traditional thought of sustainability. I'll get to that in a minute, but I want to encompass this entire viewpoint of sustainability being a good thing for a lot of perspectives. Budgets being number one. Why do you create a budget? So that you can actually plan and make sure that you don't spend more than you have. I think that's something that we need to focus on in Washington and make sure that budgets are sustainable at this point. As we increase our deficit every year, that's not sustainable. At some point, if we get, and it's not too far in the distant future, let's say we get to 20 trillion in debt and we have a 5% interest rate on that debt, that's $1 trillion a year that we are spending on that credit card payment. That's huge. So that's one priority. Uh, then we go to some of the more obvious sustainability issues, such as energy policy. So we have our fossil fuels. Those, regardless of how much time we have, those are finite. We can't get more. Do we want to be the generation or a couple of generations that consume all of it in the next, 20, 40, 50 years? I would say no. Some of those fossil fuels, we might have 50 years worth of supplies. Other years, we might have other fuels, we might have a couple hundred years. But regardless, we should consider the fact that that is finite and have policy accordingly. Another kind of sustainable scenario is we call it energy independence, and that would be with the United States. The recent issues in Ukraine kind of emphasize how important country sustainability of energy is. Europe right now they're in a pickle, frankly, because they're susceptible to the whims of Russia. I don't want to be in that scenario for the United States. We do have a variety of options. There are things that should be considered as far as production of local resources, and there's also the obvious trying to get perpetually sustainable energy resources like the sun. Um, Other things, as we know, wind power and things like that. So those are priorities that should be viewed through the sustainability prism. As far as the environment goes, a couple things pop into my mind when sustainability comes up. Things like the oceans and the rainforests. So as a child, I had a fascination with the Amazon rainforest and actually South America in general. But I wanted to save the rainforest. It was something that I saw. We're losing the country of Spain every decade. Maybe it was every 20 years, but just considerable amounts. Obviously, if we keep reducing the rainforest, at some point it's going to disappear. Maybe it's slows down on the deforestation, but that, and then as far as the oceans go, my understanding is that over the years, maybe the last century, fishing has become affected by human populations. There was a certain amount of fish that, and each year it's harder and harder to get the same amount of fish.
Yep.
Obviously, that's math that's saying we're going to go less and less and less. This kind of bundles into a larger topic, which probably deserves a separate video, but it gets into the planet and the population. And I know there's some people that when they start hearing about that, their reaction is, um, don't be foolish. This planet can support many, many billions of people. And I agree that it technically can, but for how long? Um, right now we have 7 billion. Is 20 billion the number that things start going haywire? Is it 15? I don't see, I see a lot of reasons for us to emphasize a smaller population. I don't see many reasons for us to want to emphasize a larger population, except for the word growth, which we use to be the answer to a lot of our policies. Well, we can just grow our way out of it, and in some cases that's fine if it's an industry that works. So be it. But just by having 10 billion people now or 15 billion people, that'll grow us out of issues with Social Security or what have you. I think anybody would reasonably conclude that if growth is your strategy, at some point you're going to grow too big from a planet standpoint. Climate change, another one that probably deserves its own video. Hopefully we can agree that climate change is not about Earth, but it's about humans and other living species on Earth. Earth is going to be fine regardless of what we do. It's been around a while. It's going to be around a while after we're gone. We're basically a sneeze in the Earth's lifespan. So it's about how we live or don't live on the Earth, and what we do to the Earth to impact our ability to live there. Now maybe we adapt, and maybe it does get hotter and the human race and some other races adapt to it, or maybe we find ways to stay at the temperature that works best for us. But I think sustainability needs to be kept in mind in a broader context. Again, that probably deserves its own video. Going back to the financial safety nets, we've got things like Social Security that were planned on when people had a lifespan of early 60s, and maybe they would use their benefits for 1 or 2 years. Well, obviously that's changed since then, and I think we all can conclude the current system is unsustainable as it is. So we need to get it on track to where it is sustainable, whether that means changing the ages of eligibility, maybe changing the amount of eligibility, maybe even changing whether you're eligible at certain income levels. All that stuff needs to be considered, but right now it's on an unsustainable path. So there are a couple of different types of things to consider. There are things that are going to be temporarily unsustainable, for instance, a war or a depression or significant crisis, and we're going to have to react in an unsustainable fashion for a period of time, but we need to prioritize getting back to a sustainable situation. Right now, I would argue 2008 was a financial crisis. Maybe there were things that we should have done temporarily, as we did, but we're 6 years out. I don't think we're in crisis mode. So the justification of having an unsustainable budget, I don't think is an adequate justification in today's situation. As far as like departments and policies within the government, I think whenever possible, we should have those departments be sustainable again. Things like the SEC, the FCC, the FDA, those are things that ideally we can pass the cost of that regulation onto the industry, and the consumers, us, will happily pay the FDA's fees within the price of goods because they're testing it to make sure that it's safe for us and going through all their procedures. Same with the SEC as far as investments. There needs to be some regulation, and that needs to be paid within the department. Then, and then there's going to be some things that are permanently unstable in a departmental view. For instance, the Department of Defense. To have a standing army, it's not going to pay for itself, but we want to have it because we need to defend ourselves against foreign threats and things like that. So those things need to be classified in a particular way that we accept the fact that it's unsustainable as a department, and we've said we want to spend 200 billion or 300 billion or whatever the number. Same with education. Um, Now, hopefully, both of those items and all the other ones that are unsustainable have a proper return of investment for us. In the one case, it's a sense of security. Um, that's tough to put a dollar value on. And then in the sense of education, it's producing a workforce that will be able to replace the previous workforce. So I think it's important that all of those types of things need to be viewed in that spectrum. In closing, the thing that I find interesting is that both parties and many people like to talk about what we're leaving our future generations and our children. But they conveniently kind of forget the other part when, on the one hand, you might say, we can't leave them any debt, but then they forget about leaving a clean planet, or at least a sustainable planet, and vice versa. So I would like to put forth the point of view that we should think about our future generations at all times and do things in a sustainable manner. And that concludes my point of view on sustainability. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you see that I'm trying to be consistent, and because of the nonpartisan nature of the way I'm running the campaign, I don't need to worry about what parties or special interests are going to say. I just want to have a consistent long-term policy. Thank you for your time. My name is John Campbell, and I appreciate your support.